Hello, hello. How's it going, Cancer? This is a full year 2026 tarot reading that I am going to be laying out for you, where we go over every single month in the year 2026 in terms of love and romance. Now, I'm using a deck that is called the Yokai Tarot deck, in which there is pictures of Japanese mythological folklore on it, but the interpretation is going to be the same as the standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck, because this deck is based on that original famous deck. We're going to get to zoom in really closely so that you can see all the images here and understand the deck more fully and understand why we have come up with what it is that we have come up with in this reading. And I'm going to kind of lay it out in a monthly format, which looks like this. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and then I will get November and December laid out for you here. I'm also going to use a secondary deck. It's called the Dark Fantasy Tarot, where we're going to get a little bit of that clarification energy, because if you know anything about my readings here, I love to approach this from a Gnostic perspective, a mysticism perspective, in line with how Arthur Edward Waite interpreted his most famous Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So if you're ready, we've got these cards laid out. I've got my secondary deck ready. Let's zoom in and let's get into the month of January for people in relationships, or people who have their eye on someone, or those of you who are single and looking to begin in the dating world. All right, so the month of January, looking at this nice and close, we have the Four of Cups energy. The Four of Cups traditionally is a energy that kind of vibes with being like a lump on a log. When it's in the upright position, you got it in the reversal, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But when I say a lump on a log here, it's typically because if you look closely, the look on in this case, the otter's face is not exactly thrilled, and certainly not looking at the offer of this hanging cup that you see next to him. It's the hand of God, the hand of the Supreme, you could say, offering this otter a way out. And yet the otter in this depiction does not look at it. And in traditional Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, it's a gentleman instead of an otter. In the reversal, though, the meaning does lean more towards a beginning process of understanding gratitude, where instead of focusing on losses from the past, you're entering into this ability to view things from a new perspective. And what that new perspective might look like, I'm going to, in a moment here, pull that additional card. As I had mentioned, the Dark Empath card. Let me just kind of put this here, and we will get a little bit of a shuffle. And we will see what we have for this new perspective that you might find occurring in the month of January. The card is the Devil card in the reversal position. Just take a moment here to oogle, if you want, at this wonderfully dark tarot deck. And I love that this is in the reverse position, by the way, because the new perspective is very straightforward. Because the Devil card, as one of the major arcana cards, it's called, the one big secret of that card is that your bondage is temporary. And when the card is in the reversal position, it means you have come to that point where you realize the struggles from the past, the bondage from the past, you're releasing yourself from that. You're releasing yourself from feeling like you're in stuck energy all the time, like a lump on a log. And in this case, because we're talking about the Four of Cups in this journey of new perspectives, then in the month of January, prepping you in the realms of love and relationships is this view that in the end, you can have what you need. You are not stuck for previous situations. You are not defined by previous hiccups, previous mistakes. And that alone gives you the grace and viewing yourself with a humility so that you can address your relationships in a much more full energy. Coming into union with somebody in a better energy. Something else that I want to mention about the Four of Cups in the reversal over 100 years ago when Arthur Edward Waite described that card in its reversal energy. And he published it in a book that he called The Pictorial Key to the Tarot. That card means novelty, including new relations. So for those of you who are in a relationship, it may be that this new perspective that you have in the relationship causes you to have a new novel, which can be exciting, energy with the person that you're in a relationship with. Instead of being drudged down into past circumstances or scorekeeping, it's a very light, freeing energy. For those of you who are dealing with having your eye on someone, maybe you're not in an established bond, but instead you are open to love, but also you have a bit of a preference, maybe to have a rekindling with somebody, or maybe that there's a friend of yours or a coworker, that kind of vibe. There could be a newness or a novelty, especially in new communications that come from this month, in the month of January 2026. Especially if those communications lighten things up and assist in that devil in the reversal energy, where it leads you towards that freeing feeling, that light feeling, and that feeling that you're no longer trapped, no longer stuck, no longer in a bondage dynamic. And for those of you who are not in a relationship, you could find lighthearted communications coming in a very novel way, new relations coming in that, again, are associated with this vibe that you're in, or that the person you're speaking to is in, where there doesn't seem like this connection to old past wounds or old habits that you've already learned lessons from. Now, the month of February has a bit of a different energy, where there's light novelty, like I said, for the month of January. The month of February has a bit of an energy of, it is newness, but there's a delay quality to it. The Ace of Cups is when you communicate with somebody and it feels like you're overflowing with happiness, overflowing with desire of that, but the kind of desire that makes your heart feel floaty instead of, your pants. Quite frankly, the Ace of Cups at times can even have to do with the kind of passion that brings family, unity, children as a vibe. The thing is that in the reversal position, it is an indication that you get this lovely feeling of overflowing joy, but at a later date. It becomes the card of a delay. If I was reading a pregnancy reading as an example, I would look at someone and say, hey, you have unity coming at some point in the future, but it's on a delay a little bit. But whoever it is that you may be speaking to, or this new novel energy that's coming in between January and February, it's probably connected to that. So if you are speaking with somebody or having a good interaction with somebody between January and February, later on, because it's the Ace of Cups, we may see this pattern surface a little bit more. Oh, and you know what? It just dawned on me. You have the 10 of Cups at the end of this reading. When I shuffle these cards right in front of you, I'm reading right as we go. And sometimes I put them down quickly and I don't necessarily look at a card until I look at the card. And I just noticed that. You genuinely have some of the best cards at the end of 2026 after a couple lessons are learned, and we'll get to that. But first, with this new novel situation, this new communication that might come in, with the Ace of Cups in the reversal, let's get a shuffle from the Dark Fantasy Tarot deck here, and we'll do the same thing and just see what kind of extra messages we might be able to get relating to this Ace of Cups. The Seven of Wands is here. I love this in the upright position because the Seven of Wands is the card of you being on top of the world in a strategic sense, like knowing your worth, knowing what you deserve. And if anybody ever tries to tear you down, like for those of you, if you are in a dispute or anything with previous relationships, you have the winning card when it comes to the Seven of Wands in the upright. If you look closely, you see all those other wands that are surrounding him. Those are, in tradition, in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, those are people who could serve as enemies or obstacles. And yet, he stands higher than all the rest of them. He has the ability to persevere, and he's actually using this magical wand in his hand to get things done. So it tells me that this energy that's come up, this new energy for a lot of you in the month of February, with that Ace of Cups delayed or in the reversal, is akin to saying that you might have this new energy within yourself that you're slowly unfurling, where you're tackling your self-worth. And again, furthering the energy of a new perspective that we saw in the month of January as you come into the month of February. When you're with a relationship, you may be like, hey, I know my self-worth to some degree. I'm really learning about it. And you're less prone to letting circumstances in relationships become unhealthy or dominate you. And in the alternative, for those of you who are not yet with their eye on somebody, again, searching for someone, or even if you do have your eye on someone, if you do choose to get into a relationship with someone, you have spent this time in February being okay with the time that it takes to establish a relationship, and also knowing that when you're choosing someone in the future to bring into your life and commit with, you're setting yourself up for a winning angle because you're coming into the world of dating or looking for that person with a mind to your worth and a mind to success, instead of, a mind of super anxiety prone thinking, negative thinking, doubting yourself. You don't have any of that energy showing up in the month of February. That leads us now to the month of March. Also, if you hear my stomach grumbling, don't worry, I'm not hungry. I just ate like 8 eggs in a row. So I'm currently digesting, if you heard that. Okay, so the month of March, you do slide into a little bit of a stuck energy. It's the Hanged Man. And what the Hanged Man card means is that you need to further yourself on a new perspective. And I would bet that it's probably the perspective that you were toying with in January. So as you come into January 2026, if you see yourself really like downloading information about a new perspective on love, how you can approach it, it seems like it takes a little bit of integrating as you go from January to February, and then you get another kind of hit on integrating that new perspective so that you don't get ensnared in the web that you can see in this photo. Now, the spider's web in this depiction here is a web that the spider itself has created. So it's important to understand that sometimes we tangle ourselves up in our own web, and we want to prevent as much self-sabotage as we can in the realms of love and relationships, self-created problems. Because of course, if we do create problems like with our communication, with our perceptions on things, or how we handle other people, by the time we get into a relationship, that could snowball effect and blow up on us a little bit in the relationship. And it seems like you might have some reason, you might have a reason in the month of March to suddenly give that another look. It could be for some of you that the communication or the new and novel experience that you experience in the previous month, in February, because it's a card of delay, something may have happened in the month of February 2026 that caused the delay. And it may have been a bit of a tangled web that you could have found you participated in. Like communication that went south, or putting your foot in your mouth, or maybe a perspective about a relationship that you kind of unleashed at the wrong time. Sometimes things like that happen, wrong place, wrong time, just, saying something flippantly. It's not a super negative energy because we're not showing things like, so far, the Devil card, the Heartbreak card. There is a bit of heartbreak energy that we will talk about in a moment, but for these first 3 months, it's more like foot in mouth syndrome. And the card that we are pulling together with this, we have the High Priestess. This is very valuable and very important when it comes to understanding the new perspective that you're developing in love by the time you get to March. Because the High Priestess, when she is in the upright, she brings a spiritual perspective, going on the right path in life. Listening to, you might call it Holy Spirit, you might call it wisdom, you might call it intuition, that internal peace, that's what she's connected to. But in the reversal, she is resistant to doing that. And in this case, you or a person that you might be talking to may need to look at perspectives that you have, again, in relationship dynamics, because there may be something that you are resistant to changing about your views of relationships, but connected to your views of relationships in the modern world, as opposed to in the spiritual world. These are two different things people often forget about. People view the modern world in a very rule-based sense, legal, kingdom sense, society sense. People think first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby and a baby carriage. We have all these rules for relationships. It's very rigid and dogmatic sometimes. And I think it's a learning lesson that people often go through in relationships, where they realize that they went into a relationship with a view of how it's supposed to be a white picket fence. And after some learning and some experience in the realms of dating and relationships, we start to tear down that rigid way of looking at a relationship and say to ourselves, oh shit, we've had the wrong view of how this is supposed to operate the whole time. Once we gain that new perspective of how we've tangled up a web of our perspective in relationships, once we've named it, once we see what it is, then we can pull back the layers a little bit. And that's what the high priestess does. She pulls back the layers and says, and reminds us that all relationships are different. They all have their own paths. And I mean, looking at it even 100 years ago, most people were introduced into arranged marriages, or people got married and eloped after like 1 week. Or somebody's cousin married another cousin, unfortunately. Or you might have things like a spouse died and the spouse that was left over went and married the brother. Like relationships are vastly different than the picture perfect view that we have in the year 2026 or 2025. Even the realms of dating has only been around for 70 years in the way that we do, well, what started in the early 30s, 40s, and 50s, going steady with someone. You see what I'm saying? So there's a view that looks like it needs to be adjusted in the month of March. And that brings me to the month of April, because as I mentioned, in this high priestess energy in the reversal, that means you're resistant to changing something in the month of March that you will have to look at. And now as it turns out, for the month of April, the heartbreak card has suddenly come up. And it may be that the perspective you had in the month of March is leading to a little bit of a tense feeling in April. Looking at the infamous Three of Swords card, this is the card that most people recognize. Even if you've never had a tarot reading before, you had likely stumbled across a visual representation of what tarot cards are and found that one of the most famous cards is a heart with 3 swords piercing into the heart. It's not an easy energy to deal with. It is of heartbreak. It is of betrayal that can come up, whether it's in the upright or the reversal position. I will say that in the reversal position, the Three of Swords, which you received it in, is a card of error and miscalculation. It is not just any sense of betrayal that happens because of somebody maliciously doing something. They wanted, to ruin something. No, it's a miscalculation that happens, which kind of leads us to the previous energy again that we were just talking about, where there is a perspective that needs to be changed in order to have the fullness of a real, true, good relationship, lest the perspective that you hold on to and stay resisting a change in is the error that's leading you to express yourself in relationships in a certain way. As an example, for those of you who are in a relationship, you might view that a person must change something when you need them to, in the way that you need them to, instead of the way the universe does. And because you're pressing on a topic, it backfires. And the error is that you should not have necessarily attempted to change a person or a dynamic in a certain way. Another example could be keeping score. That could be something that shows up where somebody makes the error of, or having too much anxiety is another error that can happen in relationships. Also, playing too many guessing games about how the future comes. And take it from me, I'm a tarot reader. That's what I do. But I always have to remind people when I watch people play guessing games in life, right? When I'm navigating that energy, I have to remind people, even sometimes, to step back from the world of tarot, because putting yourself in the position of guessing and predicting and analyzing too much of the future robs for the present, and in and of itself becomes an error, right? Or a miscalculation. There are times to predict. There are times to make guesstimations. There are times for analysis, but it's not all the time. There should be times to step back from the perspective, change the perspective, let the perspective simmer and settle and absorb and integrate, lest it become an error or a miscalculation. For those of you who are, having your eye on someone, Perhaps there was a little bit of communication, but the communication got a little bit delayed at the beginning portion of the year, like we saw in and around February. It may have happened that there was some communication that kind of fell flat a little bit, an error in what topics you might have chose to speak with an individual. Maybe ones that an individual you were talking to or had your eye on was not quite comfortable in discussing at that time. And for those of you who are just newly dating, maybe you began to talk with somebody, but it kind of fell off because it was, again, an error had occurred at some point, a miscalculation or a miscommunication. In which case, let us look a little bit further with that Dark Empathy tarot deck and see what else we can pull out here. Or not Dark Empathy, Dark Fantasy Tarot. It's the Wheel of Fortune. That's a really good analogy, I think, when it comes to miscalculations and error, is to look at the Wheel of Fortune. Because in life, sometimes having certain communications or going certain roads we think are useful at the time that we have analyzed something or taken a guess at it. And we go up and we spin the wheel of life. We give it a shot. We shoot our shot. And then it turns out that it falls flat and the wheel turns and hits the wrong, not the winning piece, essentially. That's the thing about relationships also, is there is a quality where we have to get used to taking certain risks in relationships and becoming vulnerable and seeing if the risk pans off. But it's also not a one-size-fits-all thing. Just because you make an error doesn't mean you're going to necessarily make the error 17 more times just because you do that topic. You could communicate about one topic with an individual and then 3 months later, that same topic doesn't bother them anymore. This is the ebb and flow of life. So it does just seem like there's a bit of room for miscalculations, that chance and luck and fate were a little bit not on your side necessarily in that month of May, in that month of April. But I will say, the month of May picks up in a different note. Let's get into that now, because we have a favorite card of mine coming up. For the month of May, we have the Six of Swords. Now, here's how this energy works. Typically, this is when you unite with someone in the upright position. That's why there is people together in the boat, going on a journey with one another, choosing to commit to this path with one another. So it can be a card of commitment. You received it in the reversal, which does not mean that it is not a card of commitment. I know that people tend to think in opposites. When they see a card in the reversal, they're like, oh, that must mean no commitment. On the contrary, in Arthur Edward Waite's mystical understanding of it, albeit I would even say medieval understanding of the Six of Swords, if you were to begin to go on a trip on a boat, what would you need to do to make it happen? If it was in the reversal before you had left off, what would you need to do? From a medieval perspective, you would have to make an announcement that you were going somewhere. Maybe you would have to write down a notice to your family or to somebody to let them know, hey, I'm about to go on this trip. Because of that dynamic, Arthur Edward Waite expressed that the Six of Swords in the reversal is the card of declarations of love. Declaring and announcing to somebody that you are wanting to go on a journey with this person. Not that you're not going to commit, but you declare the energy. So in this month of May, all of a sudden, off the back of heartbreak, seeming error and miscalculations, somebody speaks up in that month of May. And if it's not you who declares your love, it's going to be somebody to you. If you hold off, again, if you make the decision consciously, it is not me who's going to be writing a bunch of big paragraphs of declarations. I'm not sending a lengthy text message to my partner or to the person I want to be with. If you're not choosing to do that in May, then anticipate that someone is going to get a hold of you. But if you are the person who cannot get that itch out of your sleeve, and you're like, I have to message this person, I have to message them, just be careful a little bit with that kind of energy, because it may continue the wrong place, wrong time dynamic. It may be you who decides you want to declare some kind of love to a person that may not be received properly. And we'll get to that in the next month in a moment. For now, let's do the same thing with this energy of this declaration of love. Let's grab that Dark Fantasy Tarot and see what kind of clarifications we have with this. We have the Emperor. This is a lovely energy because it does insinuate a wantingness of partnership. Well, that's what an emperor does. He has his empress, right? The thing is to watch out for with the emperor is they have a tendency to over-focus on the empire that they're trying to build, instead of the snuggly, cuddly, lovey, intimate aspect that comes with a relationship. Because if you look behind him, what is in his empire? Rocks, challenging mountains. On the original Rider-Waite-Smith depiction of the emperor, his background image, his empire that he's building is barren. That is not the kind of relationship that anybody wants to create. And yet, the emperor still sits on his throne trying to build what he wants because he's trying to control it into existence. So, if it is you who chooses to declare love, or write a big long message to somebody, as an example, in that month of May, you may be doing it as a way to control the situation and try to kind of force communication or change a direction in your relationship world with somebody you're in a relationship with, especially if you guys have had a bit of a sour previous month. Or for those of you with your eye on someone, you might try to get the ball rolling, but it's actually coming from a place of fear and control where you're hoping that if you say the right thing, you might be able to convince this person to see you in a different way. And the same could be said for the emperor if it is someone declaring their love to you. Now, again, it depends on how your energy is at that time. If you're dealing with someone and you like them and they declare their love to try and get the ball rolling, then you're probably going to be like, yes, I'll accept your ball rolling. Declare your love to me, you know. But if it is somebody that you've been talking to and you're not really feeling the vibe, then that is something to watch out for in the month of May, that declarations may come and you may have to navigate how to let that person down gently or remind them that they should come from a place of really seeing both sides instead of just trying to get the ball rolling on their side. Now, for those of you who are single and not speaking with anybody at this point in the month of May, you might find that you're switching up things, like trying a new dating site or going out with a new group of friends as a way to control and navigate the journey that you are on. Trying to express yourself or declare yourself in a new way. You could find yourself showing up more at certain locations, or again, maybe changing up how you write the biography on your dating site. In any case, it's that mesh of journeying in love and the dynamics of kind of controlling how the pieces fall together. For those of you who are just newly speaking with someone in the dating world, by the time you get to May, there could have been some difficulties that you've had the month before, because that Three of Swords is the month before. And perhaps there may be an urge to kind of have a conversation that you want to get out in the open. Communications, writings, again, declarations are the name of the game for the month of May. Now let's move on to the month of June, because we're halfway through 2026 when we're getting this reading here, and that month of June is important. So the month of June here, halfway through, is the Hermit card. I like that it's in the upright position though, but the Hermit card does insinuate that you're feeling a little bit more on your own. So if there was a declaration of love the month before, it may not have landed the way that you wanted it to be. If it came from somebody else and somebody communicated with you, it may still feel like you're at a bit of a distance in the month of June from this person. Maybe they live at a distance. Maybe they're on their own path or their own journey that they're kind of following. Maybe someone had to let you know, hey, I'm busy working lately. I want to get together, but I got a lot on my plate. Because again, the name of May was about communications, and now the month of June is about having to do your own thing. But not in a negative way. See, the High Priestess that we received earlier on was a card of resisting the spiritual path, but the Hermit in the upright is the opposite. It is that time in the month of June, and this is why I said it was important. It's that time in the month of June where you stop resisting the path and you view the new perspective and you view the challenges, even that may have happened over the last little bit, as beneficial. And it allows you to light the way up and gain some kind of answers, especially from a spiritual perspective, because that's what the Hermit is. He is like Diogenes in Greek mythological history, the man who searches for the truth with the great lantern in his hand. See that lantern he has? That's the lantern of truth. He is searching for honesty and truth and answers. And so it seems like there is a bit of truth in revelation that you will find occurs in your dating or your romantic or relationship life in that month of June by choosing not to resist anymore the new perspective about relationships. The card that I just had fly out at me, by the way, was the Lover's card in the reversal position. What this says is in the month of June, you feel and see the path and you don't resist that path with regards to how you had to be separate from situations in your past or unbalanced. A lot of the times when we are on a path in love, we get resistance when it comes to analyzing how we are not fulfilling what we wanted fast enough. We kind of say to ourselves, how come I haven't gotten it right yet? How come I'm not in that relationship? Or how come me and my person are just not getting along? This feeling of tension, this feeling of separation. And we will try to push against that as much as we can because we don't want to have a bummer relationship. We don't want to have a prolonged love life where we don't get into it and our wishes and desires don't come true. But when the Hermit is here shining a light on that separation, you suddenly see the new perspective that you've been working on in the last little bit over these first few months of 2026. You see the value in the separation. You see the value in walking a path where you change perspectives. That's it. Remember, the Hermit card is a major arcana card. Every major arcana card has a big major secret to it. And the Hermit has the transformation of the perspectives in a spiritual sense. And the Lover's card is when a person transitions, like the Garden of Eden, right? From one state to the next through a falling, through a situation where they felt bound and stuck. But the bondage is actually temporary. That's the idea of the Lover's card from a medieval perspective, is that humanity was always supposed to fall from the Garden of Eden. And remember, the Lover's card is two people in the Garden of Eden. It was Adam and Eve on the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And we could ask all day long why we didn't get to stay in heaven. Why don't we have our paradise? Why don't we have a good relationship right now? Until we step back and we say, oh yeah, because it was never supposed to be like this. We have our own spiritual path. We don't have to think about all the anxieties. We can appreciate how another person is growing. We can appreciate how we are spiritually growing. And again, that is the major secret, the major arcana secret of the Lover's card, is that the difficulties that you go through, you were supposed to go through, and you were still going to find yourself better on the other side. You didn't have to stress about it so much. So it's solitary time for you in the month of June. And for those of you who are single, again, it's that same realization that doing things on your own for a little bit of time, allowing for that spiritual digesting, is completely okay. It will give you learning lessons that you will then have to deal with throughout the rest of 2026 and integrate them. And that is the same. The same can be said for the month of July, which we're going to talk about now. So the month of July, if I just get it here for a second, keeping everything as organized as I can, we have the Eight of Wands in the reversal. This is a bit of a tricky energy because in the upright position, it's a depiction of arrows that have been shot, or wands, you could say, that have been shot from an archery hitting to try to hit its bullseye. If you imagine shooting 8 arrows to a bullseye, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to hit that bullseye because you've got a bunch of good arrows. In the reversal position, there is a difficulty with the Eight of Wands where the target is not hit. And again, that dynamic of mishaps, errors, or miscalculations could occur. Now, the picture itself, if you look, is the arrows or the wands in the sky, already in the sky. You can imagine if you had, even if you were shooting anything, a crossbow, a target, and the medium that you're shooting with, your bullets, your targets, your bullets, your arrows, if they are already in the air, all it would take is a gust of wind and a poor miscalculation to make it so that you don't hit what you're trying to do. So again, the Eight of Wands feels like a miscalculation has occurred, but it's in the realms a lot of the times of the goals that you're trying to accomplish and your communication when it comes to the Eight of Wands. The Eight of Wands is notorious for being a card of communication. So it does suggest there's communication that can occur. It's just not the one that you typically want to see happening in that month of July. What I am going to do, though, is I am going to pull another dark fantasy tarot, because it makes me wonder if the energy of the Eight of Wands has come up for the month of July because there is bad communication in that month, or if the communication that falls flat is like communication previously that you're focusing on again. Because that can happen if the main energy of the month shows up as a communication basis. So the card that you have is the Ten of Wands. It is something that is heavy enough that needs to be put down. It is a concept of a moment of completion that can happen. And the following cards do look a little bit sorrow-filled. So I think it is pretty safe to say that in the month of July, the dating realm, the relationship realm does have a bit of a sorrow point where you perhaps don't have to put down an actual relationship, although some of you very well could in that month of July. But what you might end up putting down is a format of communication that is no longer serving you. Because some format of either the thinking or your goals, your willpower, there's some aspect that is too heavy to maintain. And the month of July is that time where you have experienced enough of a new perspective to say to yourself that the new perspective has shown you what things need to go. Something, especially in the realms of communication, and especially in the realms of you doing something to yourself or self-sabotaging an energy, or dealing with someone else who self-sabotages. That dynamic is too heavy to continue without sorrow and frustration. So it looks like the decision would be made in that month of July to put something down. Again, that's the key to it, to put the burden down. The month of August is coming next. And in the month of August, we do have a sorrow-filled card that does have to do with loss. The ending of your year, you get an uptick. It gets much better, but there is this period happening, which seems like in the middle of the summertime, where suddenly we have loss, we have sorrow, and the Queen of Swords is a depiction of somebody who typically deals with great grief and great sorrow, whether in the upright position or the reversal position. Both circumstances, it's this feeling. Actually, in health readings, she's the one who deals with burials. So it is this energy of her feeling such a loss that it feels like a part of you had to bury, or a hope, or a relationship perhaps, an aspect that you are attempting to hold on to that you may have to bury in the month of August. There is a little bit of a quality, by the way, if you look at how the depiction of the Yokai Tarot card deck, how she is breathing out that smoke there. There's a possibility for some numbing behavior to happen for some of you who are heavy into, overeating, comfort food, over smoking, over drinking. Just be aware that when you deal with grief or sorrow in relationships or frustrations, you might be prone to even something as simple as watching way too much TV and getting a little bit stagnant. There's a bit of a numbing energy that can come from that time frame as you calibrate yourself in the realms of dating and relationships in 2026, as you analyze it and integrate why what has happened has happened. The Ten of Swords has now shown up. The previous month gave us the Ten of Wands. And we can't really pull that card back out because we already pulled it out. So now we've got another 10 happening. And we can see by the grim depiction of this card, it is as if to say, why is the Queen of Swords sorrow-filled? Because something has come to an end. Something needed to end. Something needed to be put down. And you are going through that energy in the month of August because of a seeming error or miscalculation or a bad self-sabotaging energy that happens in the month of July. These are very realistic tarot readings. When we do a full year reading, there are times when things go up. What goes up must come down. What goes down must come up again. What goes up again maybe flatlines a little bit and stays stagnant. And then the cycles ebb and flow like water, pushing in, pulling out, and then remaining calm and still. So in this reading, it's not just yay. It never is in life, yay, your whole year is going to be amazing. But you will inevitably find a couple of months that may be a little bit more challenging. And that seems to be this time frame here between July and August in the pit of the summer. Now, the Five of Swords is what we'll talk about next, because that is the month of September here. And it does continue that dynamic, a little bit of frustration. In most traditional and modern tarot reading, the Five of Swords, whether in the upright or the reversal, is feeling like a battle, feeling like you're really having to chug your way through conversations or fixing a situation where arguments may have happened, especially with this kind of energy. And in the reversal, it's actually kind of wild when it sits next to the Queen of Swords, because the Queen of Swords card, as I mentioned, can deal with burials. When the Five of Swords is in the reversal, it can deal with burials as well. Now, we are in a love reading. We're not doing a health reading, but it just metaphorically, when we're not talking about life and death circumstances like burials, it doubles down on the metaphoric energy of somebody who is aware that something had to end, aware that they had to bury and have to bury a situation, and the energy's dragging on a little bit. I am sure to some degree that it's going to be a time in the month of September and August that is very similar, feels very numbing, and doesn't feel like a victory in the realms of dating. It may have you kind of back in that mind frame of not giving yourself grace and saying to yourself, like, why is this happening? You know, why did I make a certain choice here or there? Or, you know, it's almost like a wanting to be hard on yourself, because in the Five of Swords, nobody really wins in that card. No one's ever really smiling when they're in that dynamic. They have a tendency to look back on the situation that frustrates them repetitively. And being stuck looking back on something is the equivalent to kicking a dead horse. It doesn't do much save for learning to process something. All right, the card that we have is the Eight of Pentacles in the reversal position. You know, that's a really fascinating one to get with the sorrow and the battle, because the Eight of Pentacles is the card of learning a skill. It's a card of education. It's the card of a person mastering what they can give to the world. But in the reversal position, it's a card of usury, which is why I said it's a little bit unique to have here, because it insinuates that you may feel that a person, that perhaps may be why the Ten of Swords came out a moment ago, because the Ten of Swords is a card of betrayal. Some of you, when speaking with someone, you may feel that it had to end with that person or ceasing communication for a little while because a person that you were dealing with was getting too selfish. And the alternative is true if it happens to be your perspective. You may have come to the understanding that there was something you were doing that was a little one-sided and needed a perspective change, since that is the theme that seems to be happening a little bit in this reading. Now, usury, though, usury is a specific energy. That's why I said it was kind of fascinating to get. And when I say it's a specific energy, that's because the dynamic of true usury is exploitation. It's when there's a love of money or love of societal situations that are overpowering the idea of actual blossoming love. Usury, as an example, I know people hear the word use and they think, oh, using someone, oh, selfishness. But actual usury is exploitation for money. It's a specific kind of selfishness. And so it could end up being that there was a dynamic within your societal world or a value system between you and another person that is not matching up well, where one of you may have been more for themselves than they may have realized. Or again, they may have had a view of relationships in a societal way that is not the real God-leading, creator-leading, masculine, feminine balance of how relationships should go. Now we're coming up to the later months of the reading here. This is the last month, this month of October here, where you seem to be sitting in a bit of that stuck energy. It lasts for a couple of months, and it's repeating with the Eight of Swords dynamic, which, as we can see, is somebody who's stuck. Somebody who may be stuck, but if only they could see the perspective in front of them, what was right under their nose is the very swords that can cut them out of the situation. For some of you, this could be your energy. You may be approaching relationships in a way that you could free yourself up from some tangled web energy. And for others of you, you may be dealing with someone or allowing somebody into your life or allowing certain communications. If maybe if you're not with someone, but you're just dating, you may have kind of let situations come into your life a little bit that you're having to relook at because you don't necessarily want those to keep coming into your life. Maybe sometimes this can show up when people are dating or just speaking with someone online. It can show up as the kind of dynamic where you get really flirtatious with somebody too fast. And then you're like, oh, I've invited somebody who's too lustful again. I've got myself in a stuck situation. This person might be too cranky and I didn't see it. See, there's this avenue of self-reflection that can come from this by looking at how another person gets their own selves in an issue or how you might get yourself into an issue with a particular person. Again, let's grab that Dark Fantasy tarot deck here, get a little bit of a shuffle, because I want to see how this Eight of Swords stuck energy, potential sabotaging energy comes into play. Oh, it's the Nine of Cups. That's an interesting one. Again, fascinating to get. Nine of Cups is the card of wish fulfillment. So you're essentially stuck in the energy because you're saying to yourself, why didn't I get my wish? But also with the card of the Nine of Cups, I mean, if you look at this person, he got his cake and he gets to eat it too. He's had way more than his fair share, as an example. It's a rather gluttonous energy that comes along with it, not to, step into the realms of physical situations. I'm a heavy-set girl, right? So please forgive me for what I'm saying, but from a medieval perspective, from an ancient concept of describing gluttony, this is not a depiction to shame anybody, but it is a depiction of gluttony. That's the theme that can come up with the Nine of Cups when there's difficulties associated with it. It's a wanting to have your way without compromise. And so again, it may be a self-revelatory time in the month of October where somebody is looking at a dynamic and reflecting on how they got themselves stuck in the dynamic because they realized that the wish that they wanted was not a realistic wish. You may have dealt with someone, or you yourself could be in a dynamic in October where you're kind of putting the pieces together and saying to yourself things like, okay, I can't force a relationship, or, oh, I can't force this person. But it seems like at some point someone tried to get what they wanted. Because remember, the previous reading, the previous circumstance was about usury. Really trying to get what they want. Almost being willing to exploit a certain situation to get what they want. Even if not intentionally malicious, exploitation does insinuate that one of the people communicating didn't really care about the other person and cared more about just getting what they wanted. And that's the Nine of Cups energy, getting what they wanted. And sometimes you get what you want and you have to be careful what you wish for. Or sometimes you try to get what you want so badly that you don't even get it at all because you don't leave room for the other person or a shift in perspective. Now, that's pretty much that same dynamic again. It seems to me like 3 months of frustration right through the summer. Potentials of kind of numbing can occur. But what I do like is the last 2 months of the year, we're going to get into November now, something finally shifts. Something's got to give, right? That's the way it happens. Again, I say what goes up must come down. The cycles of life continue. They ebb, they flow. And in November, you have a great card of success. The Nine of Pentacles is the card of long-term stability and wins. Not only does this insinuate that you're going to find a love, that your relationship world can find anchored stability, security, real stability, real groundedness. But that is the card of long term. Do you see how big the coin is? That's not a little coin. That's a big win, right? The key to that card, though, is the big win is long term. So it starts in the month of November. You're in the thick of it in the month of November. And I would bet to say that's why the preceding month in December, you have success again because it stretches out the success. It also puts you in line for having a much more integrated and grounded relationship life in 2027 because this is at the end of the year where you're no longer sitting in this dynamic of like this what the fuck dynamic, to be quite frank. To be like, oh, why is my relationship thing happening this way? It seems like 3 months worth of that frustration, and then suddenly something gives a little bit in November. By the way, you guys, I just want to say that these readings are always here for you to rewatch down the road. If you ever want to come to the month of November and, you know, click on the timestamps in the description, you can get a preview or remind yourself of, well, that one reading Linny D read the one time about the month of November. I can go watch it again. Yes, you can absolutely go watch it again. And I think it's valuable to look at a reading that's this lengthy and this detailed about a whole year and refresh yourself a little bit. Especially, again, from the end perspective of this year, 2026 end, when things start to get good, after all the lessons that are integrated, I would personally, if it were me, if I saw the last 2 months as good as they are in a moment, as I'll describe to you, my brain would immediately be like, damn, I can't wait for 2027 to see what's going to be happening, right? Instead of just thinking, oh my gosh, it's never going to get better. It might be worth reminding yourself later on in the year, after you deal with some of the difficulty, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm telling you that now. You might come back to this reading. Feel free to comment under the video and be like, hey, Linny, you know that reading where you said shit was going to happen in and around July, August and whatnot? Yeah, it happened. And for those of you who are ever interested in a private, personal 12-month reading, I can always look into things like the entire year of 2027 for you as well. I love yearly readings. Okay, so this victory that you have. Oh, interesting. It's the Queen of Pentacles in the reversal. Okay, first off, Queen of Pentacles, person. Court cards represent a person. Uniquely, though, the Queen of Pentacles is interesting. I know, fascinating has been the word that I've used a couple times in this reading so far. Because the Queen of Pentacles, when she's in the reversal, she's the one who mistrusts and is very suspicious, and she's actually associated to the word evil. Now, not all of you are going to feel that energy, but for some of you, if you are speaking to somebody at that time that you once thought you were so suspicious of, things went sour, you mistrusted it, or maybe they did behave in a way that was like they used you, or there was some usury, the win is over that dynamic. The Knight of Coins, the Knight of Pentacles, the stability is concerning the dynamic of somebody who is inappropriately acting, essentially, because the Queen of Pentacles is in the reversal. We can say it like this. What do you get stability in? Suspicion, mistrust, or somebody who is acting inappropriately with the King of Pentacles, or Queen of Pentacles, which is lovely to see, to gain some sense of stability and closure with respect to a person that you may have been speaking to. And to find that it's a card of victory and winning in long-term circumstances. So for some of you in the month of November, if you had dealt with somebody in the past who treated you like shit to some degree, I know I'm just saying it frankly, I've got a bit of a potty mouth, but I mean, realistically speaking here, we're all adults, so we get it. If somebody treated you poorly, November might be that time frame where that gets balanced out and you might bring that person back into your life a little bit. But from a position of long-term stability and strength, right? Functional stability and groundedness, which is lovely. For those of you who are not interested in inviting anybody into your life at that time, then you seemingly go your own way, your path in victory as a way to make up for being treated like crap previously, or feeling the sense of betrayal, or feeling a sense of loss. So it's kind of like you're killing them with success is the expression, you know? You can say kill someone with kindness. We don't actually mean kill anybody. We're just, so don't get trigger crazy on me for using that word. Sorry, YouTube, if I'm saying something like that. But I mean, the metaphor to kill someone with success is that reality that your winning in life is a win, even if you don't necessarily have somebody. And if someone is behaving poorly, you leave them to do their own thing poorly, because their behavior is not a reflection of your behavior. And also, any negative behavior that you may have had at some point is also not a full reflection of who you are and who you can transition into. It's very much a going forward to gain your own wins kind of energy in November. And then that brings us to the final month here as we come up to the hour of this reading for the month of December here. Whatever you're winning, if you have brought somebody back in the month of November, or if you have come across this time where you're like receiving a lot of gain, your success is so good. The 10 of Cups is one of the best cards. Top 3 best cards to get. Some people consider this card the best card to get in all of tarot. You can see that it's someone who is together with someone. It is love. It is family. It is unity. It is rainbows and sunshines coming out of your butt, metaphorically speaking. I'm going to pair it with another card here, right? Because this is the kind of success that happens when, like the original Ace of Cups, you are overflowing and things are no longer delayed. It is a lovely energy to get. It is success. It is stability. And it is overflowing joy. I also want to mention, let me check for a second here. Okay, let me just see. We'll start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No friggin' way. For some of you, I'm just going to say this because of the card of delay. 9 months later to get to the 10 of Cups. Some of you might have this entire reading. For some of you could be difficulties in a pregnancy that begins, conception begins. I do pregnancy readings too, right? And when I see these patterns, this is how they go, man. I see conception could happen for some of you, and the time frame of February to March. This could be the reason why there was so much crankiness for 9 months, and then all of a sudden child energy comes in. 10 of Cups, in December, you suddenly have a bundling, beautiful baby, child family dynamics between November and December. I'm going to lay that out there. It just struck me right there that pattern was a 9-month difference. Holy snickerdoodle. Holy guacamole. Okay, speaking of children, my children are about to come in the room here. Now, wouldn't you know it, the Temperance card is here. And what do you think the Temperance card is? It's the card of slow-moving progress, balancing things out. And in the reversal, it's the frustration of how sometimes you really got to balance things for a long time to get a good outcome. So if we put these two cards together, what does it look like? Where is your success and happiness? In the thing you had to wait for. I'm telling you, some of you guys are dealing with conception. And this entire time when it looked like there was a pain in the butt in this reading, I think it just could be a whole bunch of emotions and perspectives that need to get shifted and changed in preparation for unity to come at the end of the year. Not everybody's going to be having a baby, but for some of you, this is coming together with a partner. For others of you, this is somebody that you perhaps wanted to have an interest with at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden you guys are coming back together at the end of the year. And for others of you, if there is nobody you've been interested in, I would think that in the month of November, you might meet somebody related to, because it's the Knight of Pentacles in this previous month, could be related to workplace environments, learning, skill sets, career, education. You meet somebody in that area and you unify with them and have a good old Christmas, and it balances things out. What a lovely end for your 2026 and all of the lessons that have been integrated throughout this thus far. I wish the absolute best for you. I'm going to leave you off with that. I am off now to do the sign of Leo in their reading, or Virgo rather. Sorry, I'm going to do Virgo. And I'm going to leave you with this. Thank you very much for everything and for spending this hour with me here. If you ever want a private reading, you feel free to let me know. Or if you ever just want to chill and hang out, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I am the only Linny D who has green hair in her profile picture. So I'm really easy to find. Talk to you guys later, and ciao for now.